Today on Mind, Body and Soul, we have an individual whose journey has taken him from the depths of despair, depression, to a researcher, author, wellness, and ultimate advocate. He has a master's degree in science in community health, a Bachelor of Arts diploma in applied ethics. He has written numerous articles and books, countless publications, spoken at many conferences. So, Jeff, tell us a bit about your beginnings. Like, what was it like growing up, and when did you first begin to think there was a problem?
Well, I had a great upbringing, wonderful parents. It was around 12 or 13 I started to feel that there was something different. I'd like to let your listeners know that this story has a happy ending. Okay. It gets off to this kind of a start, but it has a happy ending. Yeah, it was hard to tell at that age, 12 or 13, with so much spiritual upheaval going on with puberty and so on. So it's hard to tell. Anxious bouts of depression were hard to pick out in high school. You could say that in high school everybody's kind of anxiously depressed.
Sure,
so
yeah,
it was hard
absolutely.
for anybody to pick out of that. But I found that between supper and bedtime, it was very much on top of current affairs in the Cold War at the time. Things seemed very precarious, and I was very worried on a mind level. But it was hard to tell, like I say, at the time. I knew later that there was a problem back then.
Okay, so as early as 12 years old.
Yes.
That must have been tough entering high school back then. So looking back, can you tell us a little bit more about those challenges?
Well, I hadn't yet been diagnosed or anything. So, my private hell as a high schooler was lost in everybody else's private hell, as it were. But it wasn't until I was out of high school, after a couple of visits with a psychiatrist, that I was diagnosed as clinically depressed. Now, unfortunately, psychiatry and pharmacology are inexact sciences. So certainly more so then than now. But it took me more than 15 years to find out that this was a misdiagnosis. So all the medications prescribed over that time were less than effective.
How many medications, Jeff?
Until I found health in 2000, I went through over 30 different kinds of medications. So all those medications I took from a misdiagnosis for 15 years were ineffective and in fact made me worse in a lot of cases.
So how long did it take from the time of the onset of disorder to when you found a proper diagnosis and an effective treatment?
Well, Gary, I went from high school all the way to 41 before I finally got the treatment I needed.
25 years.
25 years. I wasn't properly diagnosed with bipolar mood disorder until I was almost 35, which set us off on another 7 or 8 years looking for the right medication for it. And that was a very tough period for me.
Just a little bit more on that. So can you give us some idea as to what you were feeling at that time? Like when when people talk about bipolar, they don't really understand what that does to somebody. So what did it do to you?
Well, one aspect of the experience was really instructive for anybody with any kind of mental illness or mood disorder. With an illness, mental illness, it's bound up with your personality. If your broken leg and my broken leg look the same in an x-ray, and the treatment is the same. But mental illness is talking about how unique you are. It goes right into your own personality. So that's where it really gets tangly. And then when you're trying to find a medication that works, you want to take care of the problem, but you don't want to stamp out any of your personality. So that part was a surprise and an unexpected challenge going through all of that,
So Jeff, tell us about your family. How did they deal with your depression and your bipolar?
Well, if you really want to find out who your real friends are, reveal your weakness. That's what I found. As soon as I did that, it became very clear who my friends were and who weren't. I experienced all the standard stereotypes and stigmas during those years. A lot of people believe that anybody with mental illness has diminished in intellect or they're prone to violence. And the opposite is actually true. Often intellect is very high, and people with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of it. As a little story that I would like to tell really says a lot. Back in the 80s or 90s, the provincial government came out with a sort of half-baked policy, supposedly in response to rights and freedoms for disabled. They decided they were going to unlock the doors of the Waterford. They're going to, step forward, and but it was half-baked because they had nothing in the community to support mentally ill people going out into the community. So the next day on Open Line, on VOCM, a lot of people were calling in and saying, "Oh my, this is going to put us at danger," this sort of thing. Meanwhile, in at the Waterford, a doctor that I had who used to be on call at the Waterford told me that same morning, several patients came up to her and said, "How are we going to stop people from coming and getting us now?"
So it was the exact opposite.
They were more concerned about
Yeah.
their own safety. They were fearful of it. So I think that little story kind of, says exactly what that whole stereotype is about, and it explodes it a bit, I think.
Dirk, did you feel you didn't have any control?
In a sense, yeah. I'd say it depends on the situation. One of the things that kept me going was the realization that I wasn't quote unquote crazy. There was nothing wrong with my mind. It had all to do with my emotions. And when you're an artist, as myself, passionate and outspoken, it's hard to tell the difference sometimes. And that became a real challenge for me. But all worked out.
So you experienced the euphoria for a period of time, and then you went down low for a period of time. Is that kind of what you're?
Yes, and as without treatment, as time goes on, those two swings, if you like, come closer and closer together. So I remember I was in London, Ontario at the time, and Donovan Bailey was running in the Olympics, and he beat Lewis, was it, in U.S.?
Carl Lewis,
yeah.
Carl Lewis, yeah.
And I jumped up, and I was so happy about that. I was overly happy. And not 2 minutes later, I was in the depths of despair. And I knew then that, there has to be something has to be done.
So it for you, it wasn't a gradual onset. It was like bang, right away it happened.
No, it was gradual, but it got worse because of the misdiagnosis and not having the right
No, I mean
treatment.
from the time you cheered for Donovan Bailey to 2 minutes later.
Oh yeah, it was like
it was that fast.
It was that fast, and to the point it was almost happening at the same time, which kind of makes reality look a little weird, So I knew then it was just undeniable that I had to do something.
I guess we may as well ask the question because I'm sure there are people out there who are wondering: did you ever consider suicide?
I can't say I actually, thought of doing it or tried to commit suicide because of my upbringing and my interest in life. I just loved life. But for a 5-year period leading up to finally finding health, every single morning you'd wake up and the feeling was you'd expect it, you get used to it after a while. But each and every morning, even 10, 20 years later, it's brand new despair. It's brand new.
Explain to me, what do you mean by brand new?
Well,
it's like it's happening to you for the first
yes,
time.
it's just as scary each morning, just as depressing. You'd think after a while you'd sort of get used to the idea and you'd be prepared for it. But it's amazing every single morning to wake up that way. So I didn't try to commit suicide or thinking about committing suicide, but for that 5-year period, I can tell you, I woke up in the morning wishing I wasn't alive.
And I'm sure there are a lot of listeners out there who are going through, even right now, something very similar that you're going through, but you're here.
Yes.
You found your way through it.
Well, I've been very fortunate. A lot of people don't have the kind of support system that I had. My family has been very supportive, and my father. Let me tell you about the kind of father I had. When the day came that I finally realized there's something, I was afraid, I was so scared, I know there was something I had to do, I went to him and told him, "Dad, I think I got a problem." He said, "Well, Jeff, I wouldn't worry too much about it." He said, "You're neurotic, you're not psychotic." And I said, "Well, what's the difference?" He said, a psychotic thinks 2 + 2 = 5, but a neurotic knows 2 + 2 = 4, but he can't stand it. So, with that little nugget, he showed me acceptance and tolerance and humor and let me know that he was behind me, that he wasn't thinking any differently about me. It was a turning point.
You don't want to be treated differently, do you?
No.
You don't want people to think that there's something wrong.
Right. I mean, you want them to treat you according to your problem, but
Right.
they don't want you to treat you totally that way.
Right.
If you got diabetes, you need something for your blood sugar to go up. That's done, and then off we go. That's the kind of thing that you would like to have happen.
So, Jeff, through all of this, you've become an advocate for mental health issues and people. How did you get from the depths of despair to becoming an advocate?
Well, one day on in 2000. I was on 5 different kinds of medications, 2 to take care of the side effects of the other 3, and I had enough. I walked in my doctor's office. I said, take me off everything. I want to flush out for a month. I'll be back, and I want you to put me on something completely different molecular structure or something, because nothing seems to be taking in me. He agreed with me, made me a partner. I was really pleased with that. A month later, I went back and he put me on something called Wellbutrin, which originally was supposed to be for smoke cessation, but in the tests they found that it helped people. The same similar story as Viagra, really, and that changed everything. I was 280 pounds in 6 months' time. I started walking. I started watching what I was eating. The cloud was just literally like a cloud lifting. Every day I walked, it lifted higher and higher.
It gave you hope. It gave you hope.
6 months later, man, I was 180 pounds like I am now, like I was in high school, and I was let out of a fat suit. I started dating and everything. It was a whole new world. A lot of people say, he turned around and he never looked back. Well, I looked back and I saw a lot of people who were still suffering and couldn't speak for themselves, because often a mental disability impacts your ability to express yourself. And I realized, as a communicator, I could speak for these people. I know what they're going through. So it was then I decided, I felt a calling. I couldn't think of anything better to do with my life at that time than to help with what I knew.
Is that the reason why you choose to become an advocate for mental health and illness awareness?
Yes. Yes, I knew it was something I could do. I was uniquely qualified to be an advocate. After 20-odd years, all the experiences that I've had with mental illness and mood disorders and other people with them and doctors and the whole works and the stigmas in society, I knew what all that was about. I was well, and I was able to tell people about it. I thought I'd teach.
Because I think if I had gone through that, I kind of want to move past it and never look back and never think about it again. But you don't want to go that route. You want to help people to figure out their way through this fog.
Yes, there's a little, it's a calling. There's no question about that. There's a lot of things you can do easier, and but I really wanted to do this. Even preparing for this show this morning, there's associative feelings. I have to go and revisit those feelings from those days, and I get a little upset inside. But I work through that. It's worth it for what I can provide to other people.
I think that's a really good point. Saying the fact that you did feel a little bit upset inside, and I think it's okay for people to have a little controlled stress in their life, to feel a little bit uncomfortable, to step outside their comfort zone. Because I always say to people, you don't have to feel totally comfortable with something.
That's right.
To do something.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to decide what you're going to do.
Yes.
And do it.
So Jeff, tell us about the campaign that you're involved with and how you kicked that off.
Well, it started with a full-page ad in Evening Telegram, a feature. That was 2001, and it was followed by a guest appearance on Open Line here, and a feature in the Express. But I'd like to tell you about the first morning after the first feature came out in Telegram. I was living in one room. I was really, really bad off financially. Church mice, were asking, we're buddies. And the gentleman lived next to me all this time. He was about 50 or 60, and we'd never met. And I came out that next morning, and he came over to me like he knew me all his life, and extended his hand and shook my hand. He said, "I want to thank you." I didn't know. I thought I did something around the house or something. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I saw your feature yesterday." He said, "I've been on medication for 20 years, and whenever I go hunting or going up to the cabin with the guys, I hide away the medication." He said, "Well, I'm not hiding it anymore. Thank you very much." Well, that was very inspirational.
Well, it just lets you know that you're reaching some people.
The very first morning after.
And that's when we first kicked off the show, Claudette and I, one of the first things I said was, I want people to live in hope and possibility.
Yes.
I want people to listen to the program because they may hear something from someone who could change their life. Mm-hmm. And you're living proof that this gentleman who you were living with heard something from you and it changed his life.
Well, it was very inspirational for me personally, too, because I knew that right away it had begun to make a difference for someone. But soon after that, I got a call from Deputy Chief Joe Brown at RNC. They were just getting started with the Reed inquiry, the shooting of two gentlemen by the police in two separate incidents, mentally ill men. And he called me, told me he appreciated what I was trying to do, and asked me to speak to the command staff of the RNC and help them understand better what they're dealing with when it comes to mentally ill people in conflict with the law. With the campaign, after speaking to the RNC, I got an opportunity also to give expert testimony at the Reed inquiry looking into those shootings, which was very helpful to them and to me. I got a chance to let them know what those gentlemen were dealing with on a daily basis when that happened to them, which brought some insight, hopefully. So that was helpful. And then through the years, I've given countless presentations to nurses and residents in medical school, conferences and colloquia across the country. Just wonderful people out there, and they really appreciated the message.
Jeff, can you tell us some of the feedback that you've received from professionals or even people that saw that article in the paper?
Well, I'm looking around and I'm seeing a lot of difference since I started that campaign. It seems to become part of the standard common sense now to understand. We got a lot of local artists launching campaigns, the $1 a day thing, and we've also got the Globe and Mail has devoted a lot of time and energy to raising awareness, as well as Bell. So these kinds of things, and I can feel a difference. I can feel a difference in TV shows used to often show mentally ill people as perpetrators of crime and stuff like that. I'm even seeing those storylines being a little more sensitive to those things now, and not reducing it down to one way of looking at it. As I say, mental illness affects your personality, so it's about your personality.
And you hear stories of you have diabetes or you have a broken leg, and you can see that.
Yes.
But there seems to be, or there was, a mystique about mental illness, and people just, I guess they didn't understand it. If you can't really see it, and because I'm sure when growing up, you looked the same as everybody else did.
Yes.
But people didn't understand that.
It's not entirely obvious what's going on with you. And, people are generally good. Most people, they just don't know how to handle it. They want to be able to handle it, right? Absolutely. They want to be able to be nice to you, but they're very sensitive. Ironically, it's their sensitivity that makes them freeze.
Sure.
So these kinds of things, advocacy, people talking about it and everything, helps everybody feel a little better about it. And that way they can relax and be a little more compassionate.
So, Jeff, can you talk a little bit about your campaign, your mental illness awareness campaign, and how it's going?
Every opportunity I could take with the media, in classes, conferences, anybody wanted to talk about it, I was ready to go. I'm pretty sure I made a contribution to the evolution of the thinking of this. I'm sure, I don't know how big a contribution, but I did. But I know I made a difference in individual lives. People coming up to me at conferences afterwards, and that gentleman that morning. I got a lot of that over the years, where people come up and say, I really wondered about that, or I was thinking that, but I was afraid to say, or as I say, people really want to be able to do the best thing. And when you get up and, example is the very best teaching tool of all. And when you get up and use your own life as an example, people really sit up and listen. You take Parkinson's. I'm sure there's 5 or 10 times more money going into research of Parkinson's since Michael J. Fox spoke up. You use your own life as an example to help other people understand. It's as simple as that.
What has your journey through illness and advocacy taught you?
Well, more than anything else, it's taught me that one person can really make a difference. Some difference. Whether it be making a difference in one person's life or thousands of people's lives. If your heart and your head are in the right place and you really want to help with anything, really, you can make a difference. I'm living proof of it. But more than that, when I came to health in 2000, my 20-odd years of suffering and obscurity was at first something I wanted to put behind me and forget, like you were saying, because of all the feeling of all that waste and all those years.
Absolutely.
Right? And the what ifs, the future of looking forward to trying to desperately make up for lost time and trying to forget all of that waste, crying over spilt milk, you know. But with the advocacy campaign, formerly lost and wasted years are a valuable resource that I can use to help others, to teach with, and make a contribution to the common good, you know, which is all I ever wanted to do really anyway. And it keeps me honest, reminds me where I was and what I've been through, and that recovery, you know, is not an event. It has to become a way of life.
I liked what you said, where you used, because lots of times we'll see people using their past experiences to help, but those were good experiences. People like to talk about those things, but letting people realize that going through a bad experience and being able to teach people how you dealt with it, how they dealt with it, can really be a teaching tool and a learning experience for people who've gone through similar things that you've gone through.
Well, it's more powerful because you're actually showing your open wound, if you like. You know, you're showing your most vulnerable part, and people hear that, and it triggers the most vulnerable part in them, I think. And there's the beginning of change and thinking and feeling about such issues.
And of course, we don't want to let our listeners think that just because you don't want to talk about something doesn't mean that that's the wrong thing to do.
No, that's right.
You know, it's just that you want to be comfortable with being able to do it. And I can certainly understand some people who just don't really want to come and talk about it because they do really want to leave that behind.
Right. You know, you do that if you can, only if you can.
So not everybody has your background. And with that in mind, do you recommend advocacy for others?
Well, you know, if you can, if you're wired up like me, sure. You know, but advocacy is really just a special kind of volunteerism, really. You know, it's about using something you have to help others. In my case, I use my abilities as a communicator and my experience over the years with mental disability to help other people with mental disabilities by helping the general public and professionals gain a better understanding of their plight. It's as simple as that. For someone else, it might be using their time, for instance, to help a senior have companionship, or using their dog to lift the spirits of children in a hospital, for instance. If you really want to help, you have the power to do something helpful for someone else. It's as simple as that.
Someone said to me one time, and I thought it was great, and I think the comment that they made was, if you can help and you choose not to, then you're no better off than the person who can't.
That's right. You're part of the problem.
You're part of the problem, right? Or someone who said something like, if you can read and you choose not to read, then you're no better off than someone who can't read.
Right.
So
Absolutely
it's a choice, really, that we make. Do you want to make the world a better place or not?
Yes.
That's really what it comes down to.
If not, just stand out of the way and let the rest of us do something.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, a lot of people talk about what you should be trying to get out of this life, you know, when there's really nothing better than finding your purpose, your true purpose in the world. Then with some hard work and positive attitude, everything just seems to fall into place.
And we talked about that in an earlier show, Claudette and I. We've been doing a kids and drugs program, and I talked about, I think one of the questions that came in when some parent was, what are some of the things I need to be aware of as my children grow up? And I said, one of the things, and I've been up and down the north and south coast of Labrador with the RCMP talking to kids about drugs. And one of the things, and this is not only unique to children, but it also affects adults, is having a reason to get out of bed every morning, having a purpose in life. Once you discover your purpose, everything else falls in place.
Well, you know, it's like the fellow said, you know, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. You know, and if you don't have a direction, if you don't have an idea where you're going, I don't know where you're going to end up.
Jeff, we always ask our guests this question. What do you want our listeners to take away from this interview this morning?
Okay, well, in terms of illness and disability and poverty, don't give up. You never know what holds in store, or tomorrow holds in store for you. You know, like I'm proof of that. You know, at the worst times, at the depths of despair, I would say to myself, there must be something I'm supposed to do later in my life. So my job right now is to stay alive until that comes along.
And that really is the essence of what this program is all about. hope and possibility, isn't it?
That's kind of why I called you about getting on, because it's a wonderful, it's a very timely show. The theme of the show is very timely. And, taking up advocacy based upon all of that may seem like kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, works for me, and it's helped a lot of people, so that's just fine with me. And if you take nothing else away, listeners, take this. People are basically good, but they've forgotten that they are. Many have forgotten that they are good.
Everybody can make a difference.
You can help. Just look inside yourself and find what you have to offer. Then look around you, find somebody who would help, and make a start.
Wow, great words.
Jeff, thanks very much for coming in to talk about your advocacy work. And you're back again next week to talk about your book, Grace Unforgiven. So make sure everybody tune in for next Monday again, where Jeff Kelland will come in and continue another interview on his book that's doing very, very well. Bye-bye for now.